Key and relationship. In this lecture, I will walk you through the primary key, foreign key, and the relationship in ERD. Let's start by talking about the primary key first. Primary key is a table column. It is a column or a set of columns. It should be a columns, multiple columns, which uniquely identify the record you want. Let's take an example. So we have a member table here. We have so many records. If I ask a question, can you give me a phone number of Nancy Ward? So the problem is we have three Nancy here. Which Nancy you want? In this case, we need to introduce another column called ID to identify which row of data you expect. So you can select to say I want the number, the phone number of ID number 2, say something like that. So the presentation of the primary key is a key. You see the key icon on the left hand side of the column. When you're picking a column to be a primary key, you need to check with following conditions or following things before you pick it as a primary key. Is it unique? It is unique to identify the row of data. Is it mandatory? So the primary key cannot be null or empty. Is it constant? You will not change the value of the primary key. Let's check each column. The member name, is it unique? May not. We see the Nancy Ward, we print the name. Is it mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory. Is it constant? Yes, it is constant. At least we will not change our name so often, but it's not unique, so we can't use it as a primary key. How about the social security number? Is it unique? Yes, it is unique. At least we don't have two same social security number, same security number for two persons. Is it mandatory? It is a yes or no question. If you only serve the United States residents, that can be fine. It is mandatory. But if you also serve other countries' customer, then you can't use the SSN. Is it constant? Yes, it is constant, but it is not mandatory if you want to serve international customer, so we can't use it. How about the email address? Is it unique? Yes, it is unique. You can't go to the same email address. Is it mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory. Is it constant? Also, yes and no question. If you allow the user to change the email address, then it is not constant. Finally, how about to have a computer-generated ID? Is it unique? Yes, it's unique. Is it mandatory? Yes, it's mandatory. Is it constant? Yes, after you generate it, you will not change it, so it's constant. In this case, we will pick the computer-generated ID as a primary key. Primary key can be a single column or group of columns. When you define more than one column as a primary key, we will name it composite key. Let's take an example. Here we have a photo and the photo sharing table. Each photo will have its row, but one photo can share to more than one member. In this case, the photo ID in photo sharing table is not unique. We are allowed to share the same photo to multiple team members. And even the team member is not unique because he can have multiple photos shared to him. In this case, we need to combine these two columns to form a unique primary key. Then we call it a composite key. You will see both columns will have the key icon on the left hand side. Regarding the primary key, we also need to think about how to assign the value to the primary key. Basically, there are three popular approaches. You can use a computer-generated ID. You can specify the ID by your program manually, or it can use the sequence. Let's take a look on each. Regarding auto-generated ID, it is very common to use and very efficient. When you insert the data into the table, the database engine will assign a new ID to your row of data. So later on, you can retrieve it by the ID. The second option is to specify the ID manually. And take an example for the SSN. When you insert the record into the table, you need to provide the SSN at the same time. The value is mandatory. It cannot be null or empty. And the example of manual assigned primary key could be the social security number, email address, if you don't allow the user to change the email address, or the ISBN, which is quite unique. The third option is the sequence. The sequence allows the database to generate an ID for your new record. But the generation is based on your setting, including the interval, mean, and max value. And the sequence can be defined in different database engines, have a different sequence defined mechanism, but the idea is similar. If you want to define ascending sequence, you specify the mean value start from 1, a max value really big value. Make sure it is enough to accommodate the number of rows you want to insert. And the max value to start with, which value we start with 1. Increment by how each value will generate it. We say 3. The cache, usually we'll have this property to allow the database engine to optimize the speed. Then you can cache some value on the memory. In this case, when you insert the data, you will got 1, 4, 7, or 10, etc. Let's take a look on descending sequence. Same as the mean value and the max value. We start from the max this time, and the incremented by is a negative value. Then we will start from the highest value and go down. And there's no cache. So when you insert the record into your table, you will got the ID pattern like this. Okay, let's see how to define the primary key. Define primary key, we have two approaches. One is you can double click on a column, and then at the beginning of the column, you type the plus, and then press enter. Then you confirm the editing. You will see the key icon is showing. The second option is you open the specification dialog box we talked about in last lecture, and then you go to check the include primary key checkbox. Then the column will become a primary key. After talk about the primary key, let's talk about the foreign key. Foreign key is a table column. Again, it's the table column. And uniquely identify a record in another table. So it's used to identify the record in other table. Primary key is in our table. And let's take a look of an example. Here is the photo table we designed at the very beginning. You see we have the photo detail, the ID, the title of the photo. And on the right hand side of the table, you see the member detail. And we find that the value keep repeating. You see Chris Wong repeats so many times. Then we decided to split into two tables. One is the photo with the ID and the title, and the member table to have the name, phone number, and address. Then we will introduce a foreign key column called member ID to link or to uniquely identify the member in the member table. This is the look of the foreign key you see when you're using Visual Paradigm. To use the foreign key is for you to uniquely identify the value in other table. Let's move on to talk about the relationship and the cardinality. The relationship is showing the foreign key. And the relationship and cardinality, we find three common types. One is one-to-many, which is most popular to use. Another one is one-to-one or 1 to 0-to-1, which is optional or not optional. The third one is a many-to-many. Let's take a look one by one. The one-to-many relationship used when the record in the table can reference to multiple records in other table. For example, the member can upload many photos. So from the member side, we can identify many photos he uploaded. The customer can make many reservations. He can reserve many times. The document can have a multiple revision. And the one-to-many relationship and the cardinality is probably the most commonly used type. The second one is a 1 to 0 or 1. It's used to reference to another table, which is you have the record or sometimes have no record. An example is we have a blog post, we can have in single pieces of blog content. Why we need to separate it? Maybe it is so big, the content is storing the multi-kilobytes or multi-megabytes data, so we don't need to get it all by once. The customer can have an address info. It could be the have address or he has no address, so we can save some space. If you're using 1 to 0 and 1, you need to use it carefully. As you can see, you just identify one row in other table. You may ask a question, why don't I just put this column in my table? Just put the address info into the customer. So if you split it, you got gain the performance on use less data. The reason is if you don't fill in the data, it saves the space. And on the other side, you lost the performance due to you need to more storage space to store the structure of the table if you have a data, and more complicated query. When you request the result, you need to join two tables together to return both the customer and the address to you. The conclusion is if your data don't have such referencing table, don't want to read the referencing table record, in most cases say more than 90%, then you can split it. Otherwise, we suggest you put it back to the single table. The many-to-many relationship. Basically, the relational database doesn't support a real many-to-many relationship. In this case, we need to break it down into pair of one-to-many relationship and have an associated entity, associated table between these two entities. And it's used to parent record to reference to multiple record in other table and vice versa. The example is the student can enroll to many courses and the course can be taken by many students. So it is a many-to-many relationship. Another example is the order can contain many products, while the product can also be added to more than one order. That makes sense. Otherwise, why we need to have a separate order? Let's take a look on more example about one-to-many. A member can upload many photos to our system. So we need a one-to-many relationship for the member and the photo. Let me just show you how to do this relationship in Visual Paradigm. Here I have a very simple table, the member and the photo. To create a one-to-many relationship from the member to the photo is easy. You just move to the top right corner resource catalog icon. Drag it to the photo table. Be careful, put it to the photo label rather than inside the column. We put to the photo. Then you will see there is a different options. You can create one-to-many, one-to-one. This is one-to-many. This showing on the top is because it's frequently used. Many-to-many, or in the reverse directions is many-to-one. Let's just click one-to-many. Then you will see the relationship specification dialog box showing up. Since you map one table to many, then you need to select the foreign key of the target table. By default, we will generate one for you, but in case you already have a column that can be used as a foreign key, you can pick up here. Let's just take the default one. Okay, then now you see the relationship is created and a new column called member ID is showed on the bottom. You can drag it up. The normal practice is we put the primary key on the top of the item list or of the column list, and then the foreign key, and then the normal column. Now we have the ID and the member ID showing up here. So it's easy. Let's take a look on this another relationship. You look at the blog post. We have the blog post which have one content. The blog post will have a header that is showing part of the content for the user. When you load up the start page, we don't need to load up whole content. So we'll have a blog post, and then the content we can store in a different table that to delay the loading to make it even faster to load up. We have the basic data of the blog, is the ID, title, summary, post date, etc. And the long content we will post into the content table, which just store the long text. Then when we show up in the front page, we don't need to load up the whole content. We just need to load up the blog post. To create a one-to-one relationship is easy and similar to one-to-many. Just move to the resource catalog, drag and drop, and then select the one-to-one relationship. Similar to the one-to-many, you also need to pick the foreign key column, or you can generate one as default. Then the relationship will be created. A photo can have many tags, and the text can also be tagged in many photos. In this case, we have a many photo tag to many tags relationship. In database world, to do that, we need a middle table. We call this as a many-to-many relationship. We need two one-to-many relationship to form the many-to-many relationship. So we have a photo, and then we have a tag, and inside there is between them we have the photo tag table to make up the many-to-many relationship. To create the many-to-many relationship, also similar to the one-to-many, just go to the resource catalog and then drag to the target table, select many-to-many, then we will create the associative table for you. You don't need to do it yourself, you just name it, and then the relationship will be formed. So it's easy and straightforward. Let's summarize what we talk about in this lecture. We talk about the primary key. We talk about what is a primary key, how to pick a primary key, and we can make a composite primary key rather than just a single column key, and different kinds of primary key assignment mechanisms, and how to define the primary key in Visual Paradigm. We also cover the foreign key. What is a foreign key? Different cardinality. We talk about different cardinality and how to create a different cardinality foreign key in Visual Paradigm.